The hardest thing an adoptive father can hear is 4 words that erase 17 years in a single breath. You're not my real dad. I used to think love built over time was permanent, unshakable, something no biology could ever compete with. I was wrong about one thing. It took a stranger's phone call years later to prove exactly how right I actually was. Welcome back to Dad Law Story. If you've ever loved a child with everything you had, only to be told that love wasn't enough because it wasn't written in your blood, then you already know the ache I'm about to describe. Before we get into what happened the night everything nearly broke apart, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Daniel Ferris. I'm 54 years old, and I live in a quiet town outside Asheville, North Carolina. I run a small hardware store that's been in my family for 2 generations. My wife Carol and I couldn't have children of our own. In 2009, when our daughter Grace was 3 years old, we adopted her through the county. Her biological mother had struggled with addiction and couldn't care for her. There was no father listed on any paperwork. From the day Grace came into our home, she was simply our daughter, not our adopted daughter, our daughter. Carol passed away 6 years ago. Breast cancer, and after that it was just Grace and me. I raised her the best way I knew how. Packed her lunches, sat through every school play, taught her to change a tire in the parking lot of my store when she turned 16. I never once brought up the adoption, unless she asked, and for years she didn't. Then she turned 15, and something shifted. Thursday, March 7th, 6:30 in the evening. I'd made dinner, the same pasta Carol used to make, and Grace came downstairs, phone in hand, face already tight with anger before I'd said a word. "I know," she said, dropping into her chair. "I found the adoption papers in the filing cabinet in your office." I set down the serving spoon slowly. "Grace, I was always going to tell you everything when you were ready. I just wanted—" "You wanted to keep pretending," she snapped. "You're not even my real dad. My real dad is out there somewhere, and you never even tried to find him." "Grace, I am your father. I've been here every single—" "You're not," she shouted, standing up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You're just some guy the county assigned to me. My real family's out there, and I don't even know their names because you never bothered to ask." The words landed like a hand pressed flat against my chest. 17 years, and in her eyes, in that moment, none of it counted for anything more than a legal arrangement. If you've ever had someone you raised look at you like a stranger, take a second and hit that like button. It helps other parents know this feeling isn't as rare or as isolating as it looks in the moment. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said quietly, "If you ever want to look for them, I'll help you. That's a promise." She didn't answer. She went upstairs and didn't come down for dinner. That was the beginning of 2 years I still find hard to talk about. 2 years of a teenager pulling away from a father she decided wasn't really hers, testing again and again whether I would finally give up on her the way she believed her biology already had. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life, harder even than the months after Carol died. Grace started pulling away in small ways at first, skipping dinner, headphones in every time I tried to talk, one-word answers to questions I used to get whole stories for. By 16, it had turned into something sharper. She started sneaking out, hanging around an older crowd from 2 towns over, coming home smelling like cigarette smoke with excuses that didn't line up. I tried everything a father knows how to try. I sat with her. I set rules she broke anyway. I took away her phone, and she found ways around it. I never once said the word adopted to her again. I let her carry that word however she needed to, and I just kept showing up every single day, whether she wanted me there or not. The lowest point came on a Friday in October, 2 months before her 18th birthday. She came home at 2 a.m., and when I asked where she'd been, she looked at me with a coldness I still haven't fully forgotten. "Why do you even care?" she said. "You're not really my dad. You're just the guy who signed some papers." I stood in the kitchen doorway, in my socks, and for the first time in 17 years, I didn't know what to say back. So I said the only true thing I had left. "Maybe I'm not the man who made you," I said quietly, "but I'm the one who stayed. And I'm not going anywhere, Grace, no matter how many times you try to push me out the door." She didn't respond. She walked past me and went to bed. I want to tell you things got better right after that, but they didn't. Not immediately. What actually happened was slower, quieter, the way most real change is. A month later, on her own, without telling me, Grace requested her non-identifying adoption records from the county. She didn't ask for my help, and I didn't offer it. I'd learned by then that some things she needed to walk toward on her own terms, but 3 weeks after that she came into the kitchen one evening while I was closing up receipts from the store, and she sat down across from me, quiet in a way that felt different from her usual silence. "I found some information," she said, "about my biological family. There's a grandmother in Ohio. She's willing to meet me." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice even. "That's good, Grace. I'm glad you found her." "Will you come with me?" she asked. I hadn't expected that, not after 2 years of being told I wasn't her real anything. "Are you sure you want me there?" She looked down at the table for a long moment. "I don't know what I want," she admitted, quieter than I'd heard her in years. "But I don't want to do it alone." We drove to Columbus, Ohio together the following weekend. 6 hours in the truck, mostly silent. The kind of silence that isn't hostile anymore, just uncertain. I didn't know it then, but that drive was about to lead us into something neither of us could have prepared for. A conversation with her biological grandmother that would answer questions Grace had been carrying her entire life and would end up testing one final time exactly where she believed she belonged. If a story like this reminds you of your own child pulling away, trying to find themselves outside of everything you built together, stay with me. The next part is the one that changes everything. Make sure Dad Law Story is in your subscription so you don't miss where this goes. Saturday, November 4th, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The house in Columbus was small, a faded blue 2-story with a wheelchair ramp built onto the porch. A woman in her 70s opened the door before we even reached it. Silver hair, pulled back, sharp eyes that studied Grace's face like she was reading a letter she'd been waiting 17 years to open. "You look just like her," the woman said softly. "Just like my daughter at your age." Her name was Eleanor, Grace's biological grandmother. We sat in her living room, and over the next hour, Eleanor told Grace things I had never known myself, that Grace's biological mother, her name was Renee, had died 4 years earlier from complications related to her addiction. That Renee had actually tried, twice, to get clean enough to petition for visitation rights when Grace was young, and both times had relapsed before the paperwork went through. That Eleanor herself had wanted to take Grace in as a baby, but the county had determined she was too old and unwell to care for a toddler alone. "There's something else," Eleanor said, glancing at me for the first time with something like appraisal. "Renee kept a box, letters she wrote to Grace over the years, but never had the courage or the stability to send." She rose slowly and returned with a small wooden box, worn at the corners. Grace opened it with shaking hands. Inside were maybe a dozen letters, dated across years, some written on hospital stationery, some on the backs of grocery receipts. Grace read the top one, silently, tears sliding down her face, and then read it out loud, her voice breaking on nearly every line. Renee, writing about a little girl she'd given up, not out of not caring, but out of knowing she couldn't give her what she needed. Then Eleanor said the words that changed the shape of the whole afternoon. "Grace, honey," she said gently, "I'd love for you to visit more, get to know this side of your family properly. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. That man who drove you 6 hours here today, who's been sitting quietly holding your hand through all of this, is that your father?" Grace looked at me, really looked at me, the way she hadn't in 2 years. "Yes," she said, her voice cracking. "That's my dad." Eleanor nodded slowly, satisfied, like she'd already known the answer before asking. "Then you're a very lucky girl, because a lot of children get biology, not many get a man who stays." We drove home, mostly in silence again, but it was a completely different silence than the one on the way there. Somewhere around the North Carolina state line, Grace finally spoke. "Dad," she said, "I'm sorry. For everything I said, I was looking for something I thought I was missing, and I ended up realizing I never was missing it at all. I just didn't know how to say I was scared." "I know," I said. "You don't have to apologize for looking, Grace. Anyone in your position would have wanted answers. I just needed you to know I'd be here, whatever the answers turned out to be." "You were," she said. "You always were. I just couldn't see it while I was looking somewhere else." 2 years later, Grace gave the toast at my 60th birthday party, and she said something I'll never forget as long as I live. "I spent years thinking my real father was a stranger, somewhere out there. It took meeting my biological family to finally understand. My real father was the one who never left the room." She kept Renee's letters in that wooden box on her bookshelf, and she visits Eleanor twice a year now. I drive her every time. Not because she needs me to anymore, but because some habits built out of 17 years of simply staying don't ever really go away. And I've learned something I didn't fully understand until I was 54 years old. Fatherhood was never about the paperwork, or the blood, or even the name on a birth certificate. It's about who shows up again and again, especially on the days you're told you don't belong there at all. Thank you for watching my story today on Dad-Law Story. If this reminded you of your own child pulling away to find themselves, or a time someone questioned whether your love was real enough, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Like this video, subscribe for more stories like this one, and remember, a real father isn't made in a moment. He's made in every moment he chooses to stay. Take care of yourselves out there.